The courtroom hums with that quiet, dangerous kind of judgment, the kind that doesn't need to speak to be heard. A woman stands at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly, her breath slow, her truth heavier than the silence around her. She's not here to beg, she's here to be seen. Across the room, eyes dart, whispers flicker like sparks. Another case, another angry complaint. But when the judge scoffs, dismissing her as emotional, something in the air shifts. She doesn't flinch. The truth she carries is not made of words, but of proof. Recorded in the glow of a small courtroom camera. It is strange how quickly people decide who you are before they even know your name. Have you ever felt invisible while standing in full view? The kind of invisibility that comes not from shadows, but from skin. The courtroom shifts as the clerk calls the next motion, yet the tension never loosens its grip. The woman stands alone, her heart beating steady, a rhythm of memory and restraint. Every eye in the room measures her, her tone, her expression, her silence, as if truth needed permission to exist. She speaks softly, yet her words slice through the quiet, naming injustice without trembling. Some roll their eyes, others pretend to listen. It's always the same, disbelief disguised as order. But beneath that calm surface, the storm she carries is not rage, it's remembrance. She remembers the night she was pulled over for nothing, remembers the officer's laughter, remembers her own voice breaking in fear. Now, standing in this sterile room of marble and rules, she wonders, can truth survive in a place built to control it? The defense attorney rises, papers shuffling in her manicured hands. Her voice is smooth, dripping with rehearsed confidence. Your Honor, this case has no foundation. Laughter stirs faintly among the spectators. The woman at the plaintiff's table doesn't react. She's seen this act before. It's the same tone that tells you to calm down, to smile, to stop making things about race. But as her opponent speaks, she studies every word, every pause. She isn't here to win an argument. She's here to expose a truth no one wants to see. Somewhere inside, fear and defiance hold hands, trembling together. Because the hardest part about fighting the system isn't proving what happened. It's surviving how they make you feel when you do. The judge leans forward, tapping his pen against the desk, eyes never leaving the plaintiff. Do you have anything else to offer besides your word? He asks. The tone cuts deeper than the question. She doesn't flinch. She lifts a single USB drive, small enough to disappear between her fingers. The murmurs stop. Somewhere in the back row, a camera flash catches the judge's frown. This, she says, her voice steady, is not my word. It's his. Silence stretches. A heavy, trembling silence that feels like the moment before a storm breaks. The courtroom camera blinks red again, its light glowing brighter than anyone notices. The truth has been waiting for this moment. The judge hesitates before gesturing for the technician to connect the footage. The sound of cables clicking, the hum of machines. It's almost sacred. The lights dim slightly as the monitor flickers to life. The woman closes her eyes, remembering the night that changed everything. The flashing blue lights, the cold asphalt, the laughter in her fear. The courtroom holds its breath, and for a single suspended moment, every bias, every whispered assumption stands exposed under the glow of that screen. She doesn't need to prove who she is anymore. The camera is about to do it for her, and the question that fills the silence: what will they see when truth finally stares back? The lights dim further, and for a breathless instant, the only sound is the low hum of the projector. Then, motion. The courtroom watches as the footage begins, a shaky night vision of headlights and flashing red-blue patterns that paint fear across the screen. A woman's voice, calm, respectful, yet tinged with confusion, fills the speakers. Was I speeding? She asks softly. The officer's laughter answers her. In the courtroom, the air tightens. The judge's pen stills. The defense attorney swallows hard. The woman standing in that footage isn't loud or defiant. She's terrified. And suddenly, every person who doubted her sees the difference between what they assumed and what truly happened. Truth doesn't shout. It just waits. Patient, silent, unbreakable. The sound of the officer's voice fills the room, harsh, mocking. He orders her out of the car for talking too much. Laughter ripples faintly from the video, but not from the audience, only from the memory of power unchecked. The courtroom grows still as she's seen stepping out, her hands trembling in the glow of headlights. No yelling, no resistance, just a woman trying not to become a statistic. The judge's eyes narrow, and for the first time he leans forward, not in skepticism, but in disbelief. The woman watching herself on that screen feels her throat tighten. She remembers the fear. But now that fear has become proof, and proof can't be silenced. The officer's tone sharpens. The footage shakes as the camera captures him grabbing her wrist. Gasps rise across the courtroom. Low, involuntary sounds of disbelief. The defense attorney's confident posture crumbles. The judge's hand freezes midair. On screen, the woman's voice breaks. "Please, I'm complying." The words echo. Not as a plea, but as a mirror. The same woman now stands in this courtroom, her voice silent, but her truth deafening. And in that silence, the system she's fighting begins to see itself. Ugly, cruel, undeniable. The footage ends. The screen goes black. The lights rise slowly, but no one moves. The air feels thick, heavy, charged with something sacred and painful. The judge's mouth opens, but no words come. The woman at the plaintiff's table stands quietly, eyes lowered, as if mourning something more than her own suffering. Mourning the truth it took a camera to prove. Around her, no one dares speak. For the first time, silence doesn't belong to power. It belongs to her. And in that silence, justice begins to breathe. The judge finally speaks, his voice lower, slower, almost uncertain. Thompson. I. He stops, clears his throat, unable to find the right words. But she doesn't need them. The courtroom isn't hers to change. It's theirs to face. Every eye that once looked at her with disbelief now looks with silent respect or guilt. Truth has done what her voice alone could not. She gathers her papers, her hand trembling only once before steadying again. As she turns to leave, the camera's red light flickers once more, recording history. And maybe, just maybe, for the first time, justice feels possible. The courtroom fades into silence, but the echoes follow her long after she steps outside. The flash of cameras, the murmurs of voices, the hum of questions that don't really seek answers. As she walks through the marble hallway, memories begin to surface. Not like dreams, but like ghosts she's learned to live beside. The first time she ever stood in a courtroom wasn't to fight for justice, but to defend it. Back then, she was celebrated, respected, admired, called the rising star, until one case changed everything. Until she stood against power and learned that truth, for someone who looks like her, comes with a price. And though the world forgot, she never did. Some scars don't fade. They just become quieter. She remembers that old case clearly. A young black boy accused of stealing from a store. No evidence but fear. She fought for him, tooth and soul, only to watch the judge dismiss her every word as dramatic. That was the first time she felt her voice shrink inside a system built to drown it. The boy went to jail. She went home broken. The next morning, the newspaper praised the judge's toughness. No one mentioned her name. That day, she learned what kind of silence this world rewards. But silence isn't surrender. It's survival, waiting for its turn. She sees the moment again. The gavel's sharp echo. The judge's voice cutting through her objection. The boy's mother crying softly in the back row. That sound still haunts her. It wasn't just about that case. It was about a truth she could no longer ignore. She stopped believing in fairness and started believing in evidence, things that couldn't be dismissed by tone or skin. That's when she began documenting everything, every case, every interaction, every word. Because someday she knew she'd have to prove her own truth. And when that day came, she was ready. Back in the present, she stands outside the courthouse, the sky painted with fading light. Reporters shout her name. Microphones stretch toward her like weapons disguised as curiosity. She doesn't answer. Not because she's afraid, but because she's said enough. Behind her, the courthouse looms. The same walls that once silenced her now, forced to echo her truth. The flashbacks blur, with the now memory bleeding into reality. Somewhere in that mix of pain and justice, she feels something she hasn't in years. Peace, fragile but real. Because this time, the truth didn't just survive. It spoke loud enough for the world to hear. As night falls, she drives alone through the city. Street lights flashing across her windshield like fragments of memory. The radio plays softly, but she doesn't hear it. Her mind drifts to the boy she once couldn't save, to the people still fighting to be believed. Justice, she realizes, isn't a destination. It's a burden passed from one truth-teller to the next. Her hands tighten on the wheel. Not from anger, but from purpose. Tomorrow, she'll return. Not to defend herself, but to demand change. Because silence may be survival, but voice is freedom. And for the first time in years, her voice feels unstoppable. The courtroom is empty now. The wooden benches that once echoed judgment stand silent under flickering fluorescent light. The judge remains at his bench, papers scattered before him like fragments of his own certainty. The image of the video still haunts him. Her trembling voice, his laughter, the raw injustice he once dismissed without thought. He rubs his temples, realizing that for years he wasn't blind. He just never looked. The same woman he mocked stood before him with the strength of truth, and he saw her only through the lens of bias he never questioned. For the first time in his long career, he feels small beneath his own robe. Justice isn't blind, he thinks. It's human, and humans must learn to see. He leans back, eyes fixed on the empty chair where she once stood. The courtroom camera light still blinks red, unnoticed, recording his solitude. He speaks softly to no one. How many times? The words hang heavy in the air. How many times had he dismissed voices like hers? How many truths had he buried under procedure and pride? He thought fairness was about following rules, but fairness means nothing if the scales are rigged by perception. He remembers her gaze, steady, unflinching, unbroken. And it burns through him like light cutting through fog. Sometimes justice begins, not in verdicts, but in awakening. Across town, she sits in her apartment, laptop open to dozens of unread emails, reporters, activists, strangers thanking her for her courage. But courage isn't what she feels. Just exhaustion and a quiet ache she can't name. The victory doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like truth finally allowed to exist. She closes her eyes, the hum of the city outside fading to stillness. She never wanted fame, only fairness. And maybe that's the saddest part. That fairness is something she had to fight for in the first place. Still, a faint smile touches her lips. Tomorrow, she'll rest. Tonight, she'll breathe. Back in his office, the judge types slowly, each word a confession, each sentence an apology. He drafts a statement, an acknowledgement of bias, of failure, of blight. He knows it won't erase the past, but maybe it can start the healing. His hands tremble as he signs his name, the ink slightly smudging across the page. He looks at the final line. Justice begins when we listen. For the first time, he believes it. He folds the letter and sets it beside his gavel. Tomorrow, the world will read it. Tonight, he sits in the quiet, letting humility do what pride never could. Morning light spills across the courthouse steps. The air feels different now. Not because justice has been served, but because truth has finally been seen. She walks toward the building again, not as a victim, but as a witness to her own strength. Inside, reporters whisper about the judge's public statement, the apology that shook the city. But she doesn't slow down to read it. Her fight was never for headlines. It was for healing. And as she steps through those same doors once more, she feels it, the weight lifting, the world shifting, the beginning of something new. The courthouse is alive with voices now. Reporters, protesters, families, and strangers, united by a single question. Will justice finally mean something? Inside, the air hums with tension as the verdict nears. She sits alone at her table, her fingers pressed against the edge, calm but unblinking. The officer sits across the room, his eyes lowered, his uniform suddenly heavier than before. The judge enters, slower than usual, his robe draped like humility instead of power. As he begins to speak, every camera lens in the room leans forward, capturing not just the moment, but history itself. And through the chaos of flashes and whispers, her heart beats one truth. No matter what the verdict says, the world has already seen what it tried to hide. The judge clears his throat. His voice trembles slightly, not with authority, but with regret. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, the court finds Officer Mallory guilty of misconduct, excessive force, and falsifying records. A wave of shock ripples through the room. The officer's lawyer lowers her gaze. The crowd murmurs. Some gasp, some weep. She doesn't smile. She only closes her eyes for a moment, as if saying goodbye to every piece of pain she's ever carried. When she opens them again, the judge's gaze meets hers. Not as adversary to plaintiff, but as man to truth. For the first time, respect feels real. Reporters flood the steps outside the courthouse, shouting questions over the hum of helicopters and chants from the crowd. How does it feel? Do you forgive him? She pauses at the top step, the wind catching the edge of her jacket. Forgiveness. The hardest word in the language of pain. She doesn't answer right away. She just looks out at the sea of faces. Black, white, young, old. And wonders how many more stories were buried like hers. I didn't come here for revenge, she finally says. I came here to remind the world that truth doesn't need permission to exist. The crowd falls silent, and for one rare, beautiful moment, the noise of the world listens. That night, her story floods every news outlet. Headlines, interviews, debates. Some celebrate her courage, others question her motives. But none can erase what the camera revealed. In living rooms and offices across the country, people watch the footage. The officers smirk, the judges scoff, her steady restraint. And something shifts. Conversations begin. People start to see what they've ignored for too long. Truth, once silenced, becomes contagious. And as the nation watches, one woman's voice becomes a mirror reflecting everything society must confront. Weeks later, she returns to that same courtroom. This time, not as a plaintiff, but as a guest speaker for young law students. The same room that once echoed doubt now hums with hope. She looks out at their faces, eager, uncertain, idealistic, and smiles softly. The law isn't broken, she tells them. It's just blinded by who it refuses to see. Your job isn't to fix it, it's to open its eyes. As they rise in applause, she glances toward the judge's bench, empty now but no longer haunting. She walks out once more, leaving the echo of her words behind, proof that justice, though slow, can still learn to see. The story ripples far beyond Atlanta now. News outlets around the world echo her name, social feeds overflow with clips of the courtroom, and protests bloom in cities she's never been to. But fame was never the goal. Truth was. She watches from her apartment window as crowds gather in the streets below, holding signs that read, "Cius and justice has eyes." For years, she fought to be heard. Now, her voice has become a movement. Yet in her heart, she knows this isn't victory. It's reckoning. A mirror held up to a nation that must decide if it will finally face itself. Across town, the officer sits in a cold holding cell, the weight of silence pressing harder than the bars. For the first time, there's no badge, no authority, only consequence. He replays the video in his mind, the moments he laughed, the words he used, the face of the woman he dismissed. Shame cuts deeper than punishment. Outside, the world chants her name, but in here, it's his own conscience that speaks loudest. Maybe this is what justice looks like. Not revenge, but realization. The kind that burns slowly until it changes something within. The judge faces his own reckoning in the court of public opinion. His apology goes viral, quoted in headlines and classrooms, dissected by pundits and professors. Some call him brave, others hypocritical. But he doesn't defend himself. He attends quiet community meetings, listening to stories he once dismissed from the bench. Every voice humbles him, each one reshaping the way he understands justice. Sometimes redemption isn't about clearing your name. It's about sitting in your own silence long enough to hear someone else's truth. Back in her old neighborhood, she walks the same cracked sidewalk she grew up on. Kids play basketball in the street. Mothers sit on porches laughing, the scent of barbecue in the air. They wave when they see her. Some call her Hero, others just Maya. She smiles, humbled. This is the justice that matters, not the kind written in verdicts, but the kind that makes a child believe they'll be seen. The system might take years to change, but faith can start in a single block. And right here, it already has. Later that night, she sits with a group of young girls at a local youth center, each one wide-eyed, notebooks open, listening. "You don't have to be loud to be powerful," she tells them. "Just honest." They nod, scribbling every word. For the first time, she sees her reflection not in the pain of the past, but in the promise of the future. These girls don't just see a lawyer. They see possibility. And that's the truest form of justice there is, when one story gives birth to 1,000 others. Months have passed, yet the echoes of her story still ripple through classrooms, courtrooms, and conversations. Change moves slowly, but it moves. Across the city, new policies are being written, new voices are being heard, and new eyes are opening. She walks through the courthouse again, but this time she isn't nervous. The fear that once weighed on her steps has turned into calm purpose. The same marble floors that once judged her now reflect her reflection with quiet respect. Justice hasn't been fixed. It's only begun to heal. And as she glances toward the courtroom camera, the same one that once saved her, she smiles. Sometimes, redemption isn't about rewriting the past. It's about finally being seen in the present. At a law school auditorium packed to capacity, she stands before a sea of students, faces bright with belief, notebooks open, hearts open wider. Her voice flows steady, rich with experience but gentle like a lesson learned through pain and grace. Justice doesn't live in buildings or books, he says. It lives in us, in what we choose to see, and who we choose to believe. The room is silent, listening, absorbing. For years, she spoke to be heard. Now she speaks to teach. The woman who once stood alone in judgment now stands surrounded by the future she helped awaken. Later that evening, she visits her parents' old house, quiet, small, but full of memories. The porch creaks beneath her feet, just as it did when she was a child, dreaming of change. She sits on the same step, looking at the stars, hearing the faint hum of the city that once ignored her story. A single tear slips down her cheek, not from sadness, but from peace. She whispers softly into the night, "We made them see us. and in the still air it feels like the world whispers back, "We hear you." Across the nation, new laws bear her name. The Thompson Accountability Act, designed to ensure transparency in every police encounter. The headlines no longer tell her story. They tell her legacy. Yet she remains grounded, avoiding cameras, preferring classrooms and community centers over interviews. The same system that once silenced her now listens. The irony isn't lost on her, but neither is the hope, because sometimes the most radical act of resistance isn't shouting louder. It's standing firm long enough for the world to finally quiet down and listen. In the final moment, she stands before a classroom full of young students, chalk dust floating in warm light. She writes on the board, "Truth needs witnesses." Turning to them, she smiles, that calm, steady smile of someone who's carried the storm and lived to teach from it. "The world will try to define you before it knows you," she says. "Don't let it." The bell rings and laughter fills the room as the students leave. Alone again, she looks at the board, then erases the words slowly, leaving only faint traces behind. Not erased, just lived. Outside, sunlight pours through the window, wrapping her in quiet redemption.